Anatomy 32, Chapter 24, the Digestive System, Topics: Large Intestine. So the large intestine is primarily found in the abdominal cavity, and as you can see, it kind of wraps around the small intestine, although the inferior portion of the large intestine does enter and pass through the pelvic cavity. The large intestine has many portions to it with their own names. The very first chamber is referred to as the cecum. So the cecum is going to receive material from the ileum of the small intestine. So the ileocecal sphincter, ileo for ileum, cecal for cecum, opens and allows the contents of the ileum to enter the cecum. At this point, the material is referred to as feces. Also hanging off the cecum is the appendix. Appendix being a twisted little coil about 3 inches in length, which is thought to harbor healthy or good bacteria for when we need them. All right, so the feces arrives in the cecum. Then it will travel up the ascending colon on the right side of the abdomen. Then it'll make a 90-degree turn, referred to as the right colic flexure. Then the intestine forms the transverse colon that goes from right to left, and then it makes a 90-degree downward turn called the left colic flexure. And it travels down the descending colon and passes to about the level of the iliac crest of the hip bones or os cocci. Then enter the sigmoid colon, which curves medially up to the midline. There's the sigmoid colon heading medially and curving down at the midline. Then we have the rectum being the last approximately 8 inches of the large intestine where feces is stored. And then after that is the anal canal and the anus. The anal canal is, of course, the passageway that the feces will have to go through to exit the body during defecation. And the anal canal includes the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter. The internal anal sphincter is made up of smooth muscle tissue and is involuntarily controlled. The external anal sphincter is composed of skeletal muscle tissue and is voluntarily controlled. All right, functions of the large intestine. Well, there is, of course, movement. There is hostral churning, which is the movement of the feces back and forth between various hostra. There's peristalsis, muscular contractions that move the feces along the length of the large intestine. And there's also mass peristalsis, which is much, much faster and helps to drive the feces to the rectum at a much more rapid rate. The large intestine is also a home to many, many kinds of bacteria, and this microbiota are very important. They do things like they can break down some amino acids, they can produce some vitamins that our body needs, and also, very importantly, they take up space. By taking up space, they prevent unhealthy pathogens from making a home in the large intestine. The large intestine is able to do some absorption. It can absorb water, ions, and some vitamins. Of course, it is within the large intestines that the feces is formed and stored in the rectum. And then, of course, defecation, the elimination of the feces from the rectum, sending it out of the body. The histology of the large intestine, so the wall of the large intestine, the mucosa layer is a little distinct. It is mostly a flattish structure, but it does have some intestinal glands. And primarily, the lining is made up of simple columnar epithelial cells, some of them absorptive cells to absorb the water, the electrolytes, the vitamins, and also a lot of goblet cells to produce mucus. The mucus skin acting as a lubricant, aiding in the movement of the feces. The other layers, submucosa, muscularis, and serosa, are as expected. Additional structures for the large intestine. Along the length of the large intestine is a thickened band of smooth muscle tissue, and this band of smooth muscle tissue is called the tinea coli. The tinea coli contracts, and when it contracts, it actually forms the hostra. So these little pouches, the hostra, are formed from the contractions of the tinea coli. One hostrum, mini hostra. Some disorders with the large intestine. Well, there's diarrhea. Diarrhea is when there's an increase in frequency, volume, and fluid content of the feces, so that sufficient amount of fluids of water were not able to be absorbed, partly because the material moved too quickly through the large intestine. Then there's constipation. Constipation is infrequent or difficult defecation. This is caused by decreased motility in the intestines, so that when the feces makes it to the rectum, the feces is hard and dry and difficult to pass. And then there's also colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is extremely deadly, and because of its deadliness, people when they get to a certain age are recommended to get colonoscopies in order to examine the inside of their large intestine and look for any polyps, these precancerous growths, and then those polyps can be removed so that they never have the chance to become cancerous. And that is it for chapter 24.